Today we are going to save more than 4,000 euros on a thermal camera for our boat. Today we are going to talk about thermal cameras, ruggedized phones, and how easy, useful, and economical it can be to have a thermal camera on your mobile. We'll talk about how they work and unravel some of the great movie myths. Can you see through walls? Can you see through clothes? Through clothes?
Through clothes? Wait for me to play the Predator's vision.
Carlos, why are you staring so hard at the camera? I don't know. Greetings, sailors, and welcome to a new episode of The Low-Cost Sailor. Today we are going to talk about thermography, thermal cameras, how useful they can be both in our daily lives and on board our boats, and above all, how easy it can be to have one directly on our mobile that we can always have with us ready to use. We are going to see how it will allow us to see in complete darkness, locate people and animals at night, diagnose problems in our installations, find hidden repairs, and even look for ghosts. And for this, we are going to talk about the different options. Dedicated thermal cameras, mobiles with integrated thermal camera like the Blackview BL9000 Pro, Blackview's latest in ruggedized phones. Powerful, big, very big, and practically indestructible. You're going to see it. And thermal cameras that we can add to our mobile to be able to see beyond where the view leaves us, as for example the Thermal Master P2, a tiny USB camera to add to our mobile, and with a resolution that I assure you that we will surprise us. Do not miss it because this thermal cameras are something amazing and very unknown. And of course we are going to try it to the extreme. More than 10 years ago, when I started sailing on yachts, I had a last-generation smartphone of that time, Sony Ericsson Xperia Z3. How I loved that phone. It was compact, with a 20-megapixel camera, and it was even waterproof. I liked it so much that I even replaced the screen 3 times in less than a year. I cracked the screen countless times while sailing, and that's where I bought my first real rugged phone, the Blackview BV6000. The camera was worse than the Sony, but otherwise not much to envy, except that it was super big and clunky for its time. But I bought it, and I think I did not even reach 100 euros what I spent. From then on, my perspective on mobiles changed. I always carried it with me in my daily life, but also while sailing, windsurfing. I used it as an underwater camera on the beach. I talked on the phone sitting on the windsurfing board. The truth is that it got me out of some trouble at sea. Having a cell phone at sea can get you out of a lot of trouble, and from then on I decided that I would only have ruggedized phones. It lasted me 4 years. Eventually the protective covers started to crack, and due to the pace of my life, I didn't have kids at the time. Some moisture got in, and I made the leap to my next phone, Blackview BV9000 Pro. 384 euros for a phone was already money.
That hurts you, isn't it?
That hurt me. It cost me to buy that phone. I mean, when the rest of you were buying 700 euro phones, buying a 384 euro phone seemed to me, and on top of that you laughed at me because it was even bigger than the previous one. Although somewhat more stylish and elegant with a better camera and above all with a thermal camera. What a marvel. And that's when I decided that a thermal camera in the mobile was a must, an obligation. You should always have a thermal camera on your phone. To be able to measure the temperature of anything, to check the electrical installations of the boat and when my children arrived, to take their temperature to see if they had a fever, or to make sure they were not going to burn themselves with the bottle. What's that about sticking your finger in? No, I would take my thermal camera. The truth is that the uses are endless, and today we are going to see some of them, even some very surprising ones. Let's talk about thermography. Thermography is a technique that makes it possible to determine temperatures at a distance without the need for physical contact with the object. It is based on the measurement of infrared radiation emitted by objects. Basically, all hot objects emit radiation in the form of electromagnetic waves of a certain wavelength. And by hot, I mean anything above absolute zero. We are not going to go into depth to understand what electromagnetic waves are, but the electromagnetic spectrum covers everything. From radio waves, microwaves, infrared light, visible light, ultraviolet, X-rays, or gamma rays.
Gamma rays? That's there from Marvel, right?
Yeah,
From the comic
right.
books.
That's at the extreme end of the spectrum. That's all electromagnetic waves of different wavelengths and many different uses. The human eye is able to directly see electromagnetic radiations that are in the 450 to 750 nanometer wavelength range. This is what we call visible light. Each wavelength or frequency within this corresponds to one of the colors that we see, and this ranges from red to violet. That is what we see. The sun, as a very hot object, emits very large amounts of electromagnetic radiation in many of these wavelengths. From what we are used to seeing, which is visible light, which the sun illuminates us, but also X-rays, gamma rays, ultraviolet, and so on. But objects are not only capable of emitting their own radiation, they also absorb and reflect it. Normally, what we see is the light reflected by objects coming from a more powerful source of radiation, be it the sun, fire, or, for example, an incandescent light bulb. Normal video and still cameras are sensitive to visible light and record light, the visible electromagnetic radiation emitted or reflected in its corresponding frequency range. Below the lower limit of visible light is the infrared spectrum. Basically, everything below the frequency of red, the lowest frequency we are able to see with the naked eye. Thermal cameras are sensitive to the infrared spectrum, typically in the band from 8 to 15 micrometers, which corresponds to the wavelengths radiated by objects between 89 and -80 degrees Celsius. These sensors, basically like a traditional camera, read the frequencies, converting them into a color, and as the frequency is directly related to the temperature in each of its pixels, like the color of visible light, they can determine very accurately the surface temperature at each of those points. In other words, thermography allows us to see the temperature of objects as an image. And how can we have access to thermography? Well, initially everything started with cameras and specific devices for this purpose, some of which were very common, and we might not even be aware that they were thermal cameras. Thermal cameras focused on different use cases and of different, very different prices. The most important factor conditioning its price, apart from the brand, is usually the resolution, the number of pixels of the camera. At the lower end of the thermal cameras would be those of a single pixel, basically contactless thermometers that what they do is measure the maximum frequency of the infrared radiation in front of them and convert it into temperature. Very popular in the pandemic, and you can find them for €10 on AliExpress. There is an extremely popular and inexpensive type of thermographic devices that only have 2 pixels, the PIR devices, also known as motion detectors. We have them everywhere, and they are basically in charge of turning on the lights automatically when someone approaches or triggering the alarm when someone enters our house. With its 2 pixels, they compare the ambient temperature with the radiation they are capturing, and when they find a variation between the radiation received by its 2 pixels, they understand that there is something hot, a human, a person who is moved, and then it is when they jump and set off the alarm or turn on the light. For less than €5, you can have one of those with Wi-Fi that will trigger an alarm to your cell phone when, for example, someone enters your boat. I have a battery-operated one in here that works great and works together with the rest of the sensors that I have that all work with the Tuya Smart application. I leave the link in the description. But for it to be considered a thermal camera, it has to have at least, I don't know, more than 2 pixels. One of the most economical ways are the thermal cameras with display. In a single device, they have a sensor of a certain resolution and a display where they show the thermal image of what they are seeing. Very common in the industrial and construction world to monitor the operation of motors, electrical circuits, check the heating of electrical installations or heat loss and insulation of buildings, vehicles, or ships. You can find them in AliExpress from about €50. Of course, with practically ridiculous resolutions starting, for example, at 24 by 32 pixels. The higher the resolution, the more detail of iniquity to the image, and the more information we can obtain. For example, 256 by 192 pixels is already in the €200 range. It is already something like this that we use in our Express to detect short circuits in an electrical circuit, and that is habitually used for the verification of the isolation in the facilities. With these resolutions, you can already find many utilities in the field of temperature monitoring and surveillance, and there are many different formats. For example, in Dusseldorf, we were able to see one from Raymarine, designed to monitor the temperature of different engine elements in an engine room, being able to set alarms for overheating in different parts of the engine or fire alarms, and which is perfectly integrated with Raymarine systems. And it had better be. because for 80 by 60 pixels of resolution, they are already
How much
asking
does
for
it cost
€1,000.
every thermal pixel? Oh my
The
god.
pixel is expensive. The pixel is expensive. But the resolution has its price, especially in commercial systems. And when we talk about thermal cameras of large manufacturers intended to see in complete darkness, or the detection of obstacles at sea, or locate people or lost animals, we need at least a little more resolution. Raymarine, for example, for these uses puts the lower limit in the 320 by 240 pixels of its M232 camera, for which they already ask €3,000 or €4,000. But if you want a good image quality, you have to pay much more money. The top of the range of Raymarine, the FLIR MX500, already offers 640 by 512 pixels, that although it is not even half a megapixel, is already something more than decent to see and identify objects at night. Yes, they come motorized, encapsulated for outdoors, and combined with visible cameras of much higher resolution. We can also see them working at the Raymarine booth in Dusseldorf, which I'm convinced are superb options that work very well, but can perfectly cost over €30,000. More than what this boat cost for a camera. Certainly well beyond the reach of most mortals. But here is the low-cost sailor to make it possible for all of us to have a thermal camera with us. A much more economical version. Possibly the way I like the most to have a multi-purpose thermal camera and always have it available is to carry it directly on the cell phone. My Blackview BL9000 Pro of 5 years ago already had it. And now, when it was time to renew the mobile and buy a more current and more powerful one, I could not renounce to also integrate the thermal camera. I could have bought one without it and added as an accessory, as we will see later. But this option was the one I liked the most, having to renew the mobile. Blackview BL9000 Pro, the top of the range of cell phones with integrated thermal camera. A modern cell phone with 5G data connection and Android 14 that cost around €500. Their numbers are already at the height of any modern mid-range phone. MediaTek Dimensity 8020 processor with 8-core, 2.6 GHz with up to 36 GB of RAM and 512 GB of storage, and I tell you that this, in performance, is a mid-range phone, although already in the benchmarks, defends itself with joy. I do not think you will find any application with which it cannot deal in your daily life. The performance improvement was something fundamental that I was looking for, because the previous model did not work with the application of Insta360 and was not able to render images of it, but this no longer has any problem with that. In terms of communications, double SIM card, for me something fundamental to carry my work number and personal in a single phone, connectivity 5G, an incredible jump in the speed. Goes faster than the optical fiber in my house. I only have 120 megabytes at home, and has NFC to be able to use it, for example, to pay directly at the supermarket. And, also, as it withstands water, I can always carry it on me, so when I leave the beach, a beer please, and that's it. It has a super bright screen with 600 nits and 6.78 inches, a very large screen, ideal for viewing outside. Well, a very large screen, in a very large mobile. That's what surprised me most. If all my rugged phones were always big, this one is even bigger than the previous one. But of course it seems that the trend goes that way, because in the end it is the same size as yours. Basically, we have checked nothing more than mine, because it is a little thicker and heavier, is big, and has a super loud sound, and it resists everything. If you drop it on the kitchen floor, you have to be careful because you will not break the mobile but the floor. It has Gorilla Glass screen and military certification, MIL specs, E810, which means that you can throw it from 1.2 meters, that is submersible up to 1.5 meters, that works at extreme temperatures from 60 degrees to minus 20 degrees Celsius. And the camera, so that is one of the things that has improved a lot, especially the photographs and the recording in 4K. This one I can use it directly to record videos for YouTube and other social networks without Carlos complaining. But what definitely made me decide for it is the thermal camera FLIR Leptom 3.5 of 160 by 120 pixels, which does not seem much, but it is more than what my previous phone had, and it shows, and especially considering the price of the FLIR cameras, and that it is a Chinese phone that in the end costs €500 or even less. You have it in the links, and you will see. Okay, well, Chinese, maybe not entirely. There is something that will make you fall on your asses. Attentive. Because my cell phone has a little Raymarine inside. FLIR is the best-known brand of thermal cameras and belongs to the company Teledyne, which is also the owner of Raymarine. Of course, now I'm going to start to suspect that it is the Raymarine people who are spying on me instead of the Chinese. I have had it for more than 2 months now, and once the initial shock of the size has passed, I am more than delighted. The battery lasts me more than 2 days of intense use. It works perfectly. It holds what they throw at it. If you have to change your mobile, for me, it is an ideal option, even as a main phone. It is the only one I have, and with the dual SIM for work and for home, I am very happy. Until recently, it seemed that FLIR was the only reference in thermal cameras. But when I was preparing this episode, looking for a cheap camera that would allow you to have thermal camera in the mobile, to those who do not intend to change mobile, I found Thermal Master and its mini thermal camera for mobile P2. That sounds bad, in Spanish. Masters of naming, the tiny P2 eyes ready to connect to any mobile with Android, with its USB connector and an extension cable, in case the connector of your mobile is not very handy. And the most important thing is that, for its price of €200, even something less with some of the links and discounts we offer in the video description down, should be noted that this version is only valid for Android. But you also have a version for those who have an iPhone, because for less than €200 has a native resolution of 250, 6 by 190. 2 pixels, almost twice that of my phone, and a super resolution mode that improves the resolution up to twice, although this is already a bit of software and such. But it looks very good. To start working with it is as easy as installing the application Term Master in the Play Store and connect the camera on the mobile, giving all the permissions that it asks you. Well, you can install it on the mobile or tablet or wherever you want, because it will work on anything that has Android. I am already thinking about some inventions that I will do with it. And with that, you already have it running. The application, the truth is that it looks very good and offers the same as the FLIR of my mobile. It has nothing to envy. The most interesting thing is to select the color palettes. Some, more suitable for measuring temperatures and look for anomalies, and others such as hot white to use as a night vision viewer. It will show you, next to the image, the hottest and coldest point with their temperatures, but at the same time, and this is identical in the FLIR, you can mark cursors or areas of the screen in which you want to know the exact temperature. For example, the average, the maximum. It has many things with which you can work on the image. And you can work on the live image, but also you can do this with the images that you have already stored. Pay attention to the button that puts an X cubed, which is the super resolution mode and further improves the quality. But let's try everything and see what are their uses in real life. Well, the applications are very similar both, with the FLIR camera and with the Thermal Master. At first, you will notice the difference in resolution between the two. And the truth is that the Thermal Master stands out in this aspect a lot, although for the most common uses, we will not notice that difference. And yes, we will find many uses on the boat and in our daily life, in which either of the two will work perfectly. Take the temperature of our children, for example, to see if they have a fever. Here is when the accuracy is of some importance, although remember that it is about the surface temperature. As I have 2 of the same, I measure it from one, I take it to the other, and if one stands out, it is that one has fever. If you do not want to burn yourselves with the food, and you are very lazy, it can also be very useful, but its real utility begins at the time of monitoring the efficiency of our systems. In an electrical installation, immediately, you will be able to see the temperature of the wiring, which wires are connected, which ones are not, because they heat up those that are working and those that are not, and if our installation is well dimensioned.
More or less, it has to be homogeneous, I understand, right? There should not be
and then
any
the
specific
temperature.
point there.
If a wire gets to 70 degrees Celsius, you notice it immediately. As soon as there are cables that are too thin for the current they are carrying, stand out from the others much. With the engine of the boat, the same thing happens. The deficiencies in the cooling, anomalies, everything will shine, and you can measure it with the different types of cursors. On the electronic boards, for example, when something electronic breaks down, you can use it to find a short circuit, or if you have dropped it in the water and it has traces of salt, even if it continues to work, it will start to shine the high consumption points that will produce heating. And of course, to check the insulation. See the places where you forgot to put the Ki-Flex, as in my case in the insulation of the boat, or to improve them or at home. Where the cold enters, where the heat escapes, rather that kind of thing. In the same way, if you are going to drill a wall, because this has happened to me, and you do not want to drill a heating or hot water pipe, you use the thermal camera first, and with the hot water circulating through it, you will be perfectly illuminated where each of the pipes pass through the wall. But there are some things that will really surprise you in its use even more, as for example the search for ghosts.
We're calling Iker Jimenez right now.
Do you feel a presence chasing you around the house? As the thermal camera can reveal its footprints? Well, or rather the trace of your own footsteps, or your ass on the couch, wherever there has been a human recently, will have left its heat trace, and the thermal camera will register it. Even that, for example, if you arrive at a parking lot, the car just parked in the garage, you will quickly see this just arrived. Your wife, you think she is cheating you? She said that got home 2 hours ago and you get there, you see her car is hot. This is suspicious. but it is also going to reveal variations in materials that are not perceptible to the naked eye. This has left me flipped, as, for example, the search for osmosis in ships, or repairs that have been made on the hull of the ship that have been painted after, that and that at first glance seems to be perfect. Well, the thermal camera will reveal them. For example, look at these images. We can see a stripe that seems to mark osmosis in the bottom of the hull, and a square that is clearly a repair that has been done on the hull. We have recorded at different times of the day to check that it was not a shadow, or that it was not just any other thing. And the thermal camera reflects it perfectly, and yet with the visible light you cannot notice anything. Here you can see both with the thermal master and with the FLIR. To detect moisture, for example, on walls and things like the T or on the hull of a boat, but come on, I have been surprised. There is a boat there that I do not buy it anymore. For example, even to know the filling level of a plastic tank that is a little what reflects that, the level of the liquid with its subtle temperature difference will appear perfectly marked on the bottles. Or what happened to me, some mysterious letters inside my boat. I looked there, was nothing. I turned on the thermal camera and I saw there a strange WWW. What would that mean? Well, they were a reflection of the vinyl on the other side of my hull, just where the vinyl coincides, and there, the sun heats it a little faster, and then with the thermal camera you can see that on the other side there is a vinyl. But about the naked people, see them through their clothes. I'm sorry to tell you that this is just a myth, and much less the classic movie idea of seeing through the walls with the thermal cameras. When you see there, it is 007 and see moving through the building. The thermal cameras and the infrared radiation is not even able to pass through most glass. Although there is one place where thermal cameras are unrivaled, which is seeing in complete darkness, locating people and animals in the sea, seeing obstacles in total darkness. All are illuminated impressively through the subtle temperature differences. Through the subtle differences in temperature and its corresponding infrared radiation, here the resolution gives sharpness, and Thermal Master wins the fleet, because I would say that by far it has sharper images, that although in both you can detect the presence of buoys in the dark, other boats or even help man overboard who fall to the water, because with more resolution is much clearer what you are seeing at that time. With one you can see in the distance a point that you know there is something coming, but in the other you can even distinguish what it is. But this topic will be a subject that we will deal with in depth in an upcoming episode of the Low-Cost Sailor.
Just don't do spoilers, but...
But there is one thing I have to say to the followers of Low-Cost Sailor. The horn still doesn't beep.
Let's see. Hit it, hit the button, hit the button.
Nothing, look. Nothing. Yes, no. It still doesn't beep. But with the profits from the canal, the people from Low-Cost Sailor have given me a new horn. Chinese, Chinese.
I'm telling you that this thermal camera thing seems to me a world full of possibilities. With the mobile, I'm delighted with it. That is to say, I don't contemplate any option other than a rugged mobile nowadays. For my way of life, for the boat, for what I use it for, this is the solution. Besides, all day long when you are messing around with the engine with dirty hands, this one you can use with dirty water. This one you wash it with soap and water and that's it. I am delighted with this. And on top of that, it has solved the big problem. I had a little with the previous one, which was that the camera did not have the necessary quality the normal camera, and I am already delighted with. This is my third Blackview, and surely there will be a fourth when it's his turn. But for thermal cameras, it has surprised me a lot. Thermal Master. The resolution, that I already tell you that for the part, for example, of all maintenance tasks and all that is not so decisive, the resolution is not. With the Blackview, I can do all the operations in my daily life and everything, even. With the Blackview, I can use it to see at night. But it is that. The sharpness with which you see at night the objects and the obstacles with the Thermal Master it makes a difference. The difference is quite noticeable. If you ask me, what would I do to have a thermal camera? Well, if you already have a mobile, as Carlos, a modern mobile and such, you are happy with your mobile, no doubt, a Thermal Master. If you are thinking of changing mobile, buy a ruggedized mobile, a Blackview. I would buy it with the integrated thermal camera, because even if it is a keychain, and that's why you will surely come an occasion when you do not have it in your pocket, and yet in this way you will always have your BL9000 Pro in your pocket. Of this we have seen today will leave much more material to make some more spectacular inventions still. Thank you very much for your attention, sailors. I hope you liked today's episode. If so, please give us a like, subscribe to the channel. You have the little bell to receive notifications. You have all the links, with discount links even, to everything we have seen in the video, in the description of the video, and on our website, www.thelowcostsailor.com. We want to thank specially to our Patreons who are supporting this video and who are responsible for us to be able to do these things. Thank you very much to all. Your names will appear here at some point. In any case, and see you in a couple of weeks in a new episode of The Low Cost Sailor.
The tiny thermal master is for me, right?
Yes, you arraigned.